Whenever we do something about World War II, you guys absolutely love it, so today another extraordinary tale lost to the history books from 1940s Europe. But first, if you're interested in war and tanks, maybe think about giving today's video sponsor a look and try the free-to-play game War Thunder. War Thunder is a realistic military vehicle combat game available on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. No need to purchase, you just download and you get going. In this game, there are over 1,500 historically accurate vehicles all the way from 1920 to the 1990s. They're all carefully built and incredibly detailed, and all the physics has been really sweated over. It's really very good. Plus, the sound is incredible, super immersive. And look, you can just jump in for a quick arcade game, useful if you don't have much time, or you can play realistic and go for some more challenging stuff. Or if you're hardcore, there's always simulator, but I've got no idea how hard that is because I'm not nearly good enough for that. So join us on the battlefield for free using the link below. Doing that not only supports the show, but you'll also get a free premium tank, ship, or aircraft, and 3 days of premium time as a bonus for registering. And let's get into today's video. Looming over the Saxon landscape, Castle Colditz is the very image of impregnability. Its solid stone walls 2 meters thick, the sheer cliffs on which it stands plunging 75 meters to the Mold River below. Built in 1506, the castle has been repurposed numerous times over the centuries, serving variously as a noble residence, a hunting lodge, a zoo, a mental hospital, and a tuberculosis sanatorium. But in 1939, Castle Colditz would be put to its most infamous use when it was converted by the Nazis into a prisoner of war camp. Known as Offizierslager 4C or Offlag 4C, the facility was built for the Luftwaffe as a special high-security camp to house the most troublesome, escape-prone Allied soldiers, including many who had participated in the famous Great Escape from the Stalag Luft 3 as depicted in the 1963 film. Heavily guarded and located 640 kilometers from any border, it was thought to be escape-proof. But as the characters in The Great Escape point out, this policy of putting all the rotten eggs in one basket simply served to concentrate the greatest escape artists in the Allied forces in one place. And over the course of the Second World War, Castle Colditz would play host to some of the most audacious escape attempts in history. These attempts varied wildly in scale and sophistication. Some simply faked physical or mental illness to be repatriated back home. Others hid during activities outside the castle walls and slipped away at night, such as French Lieutenant Alain de Rey, the first successful escapee from Colditz. Dutch Lieutenant Hans Larive, who hid under a manhole cover during outdoor exercises, and British Lieutenant Airey Neave, who hid in a hole under the camp stage during a prisoner theatrical performance. On September the 8th, 1942, prisoners were ordered to pack up their excess belongings into crates to be placed into storage. Seeing an opportunity, British Flight Lieutenant Dominic Bruce, the smallest man in the camp, crammed himself into a Red Cross packing chest only 1 meter square. The box was left in an unguarded storeroom for the night, whereupon Bruce emerged and escaped out a window using a bedsheet rope, leaving a note on the crate that read, "The air in Colditz no longer pleases me, auf Wiedersehen." He was recaptured a week later trying to stow away on a ship in Danzig. Earlier in 1940, Lieutenant Anthony Allen had himself sewn into a mattress that was being carried out of the camp for disposal. Once outside, he cut himself free and escaped while wearing a homemade Hitler Youth uniform. He made it as far as Vienna, even hitching a ride with an SS officer before running out of money, and hungry and exhausted, he turned himself in. Many prisoners mocked up German uniforms and other disguises as part of their escape attempts. In 1942, French Lieutenant André Perraudot discovered that he bore a striking resemblance to the camp's electrician, Willy Ponert, and decided to impersonate him. On December the 28th, his fellow French officers blew a fuse in their quarters. When Ponert was duly summoned, Perraudot donned an identical uniform and toolbox and attempted to walk out the front door. Unfortunately, the camp had recently implemented a policy of issuing special tokens to outside workers, and when Perraudot was unable to produce his, the game was up. An even more audacious attempt was made earlier on June 5, 1941 by French Lieutenant François Boulet, who attempted to walk out of the castle grounds dressed in full drag. He had almost reached the neighboring town when he dropped his pocket watch, causing a nearby British prisoner to call out. But when Bully failed to respond and started hurrying away, the German guards became suspicious and discovered the ploy. Other escapes required considerably more planning and coordination. A common practice at the camp was for various prisoners to become ghosts, pretending to escape but remaining hidden in the castle so they could secretly assist with real escapes. On one occasion, Dutch officers sculpted a pair of clay heads, which, when dressed in officers' greatcoats, stood in for 2 prisoners during roll call, the other prisoners concealing the escapees as they crawled into a manhole in the castle yard. That night, the escapees escapees emerged from the manhole and fled while the ghosts took their place, delaying discovery of their escape for as long as possible. Colditz also saw its share of traditional tunneling attempts, the largest of which was carried out by 9 French officers starting in 1940. The tunnel started at the castle's clock tower, whose central shaft extended down into the cellar. Due to previous escape attempts, all the doors to the tower had been bricked up, but it was still accessible from the attic, inadvertently creating an ideal secret area from which to stage the tunneling. From the cellar, the tunnel extended horizontally 4 meters until it hit impenetrable bedrock, then vertically towards the chapel floor 13 meters across the chapel, then down another 5 meters, then 44 meters outside the castle grounds. The tunnel was lit along its whole length by electric lamps wired into the chapel's power supply. Tunneling continued until 1942, when the Germans, who could hear the digging through the stone foundations, finally searched the clock tower and discovered the tunnelers. But it seems that it was the French who got the last laugh, for over the course of their 2 years of tunneling, the prisoners had managed to drink every bottle of wine in the cellar and replace their contents with urine. So numerous were the escape attempts that the camp guards even established an escape museum featuring many of the prisoners' ingenious devices. They also made prisoners reenact their escapes so photographs could be taken, which were frequently published in Das Abwehrblatt, a weekly magazine for POW camps. But as creative as these various attempts had been, they were all eclipsed in 1944 when a group of prisoners decided to build a fully functional glider in an attempt to fly away from Colditz. The audacious plan was conceived by British Lieutenant Tony Rolt, who discovered that the roof of the chapel was entirely hidden from all sentry posts and looked out over an open meadow across the River Mulde. This discovery came after the murder by the Gestapo of 50 escapees from Stalag Luft 3, in the wake of which the Allied High Command discouraged all further escape attempts. But Dick Howe, head of the escape committee, approved the glider project as a means of keeping the men occupied. The project was headed by Flight Lieutenants Bill Goldfinch and Jack Best, who discovered a copy of C.H. Latimer Needham's book Aircraft Design in the camp library that proved invaluable to the design process. Flight Lieutenant Lorne Welch, an engineer and glider pilot, provided additional aerodynamic and structural calculations. Construction was carried out in the chapel attic, with a false wall being constructed to hide the glider and the men's tools. As the guards were more accustomed to searching for tunnels, the builders were confident that they would not be discovered, but nonetheless a system of signals and an electric alarm system was established just in case. The glider's structure was built of floorboards, bed slats, and any other scraps of wood the men could get their hands on, covered in cotton blanket ticking. Grain from the men's rations was boiled into a starchy paste and painted on the cloth to seal it, while control cables were fashioned from electrical cables stolen from disused sections of the castle. Even the tools used to build the aircraft required incredible ingenuity to fashion, with saws being made of gramophone springs and window bars, wood panes from kitchen knives, and drill bits, glue, and other items obtained by bribing guards. The completed aircraft, dubbed the Colditz Cock, measured 6 meters long, with a wingspan of 10 meters, and could carry 2 men seated back to back. To launch the glider, the men planned to assemble a 30-meter ramp on the chapel roof using wooden tables, and used a winch system powered by a falling bathtub filled with concrete to accelerate it to 50 kilometers an hour. After cutting away the launch rope, the crew would glide the some 200 meters across the river to the neighboring meadow and make their escape. While the flight was scheduled for the spring of 1944, by that time American forces had arrived in the area and the escape was called off, though the glider was kept on hand in case the castle's liberation was delayed and the prisoners had to send a message to the Americans. Only one photograph of the Colditz Cock exists, taken by American newspaper correspondent Lee Carson on the day of the camp's liberation. Soon after, the castle fell under the control of the Soviet Red Army, and the ingenious glider was never seen again. Though the original Colditz Cock never flew, recent experiments have proven that it would have worked. In 1999, Southdown Aviation Limited built a full-scale replica based on Bill Goldfinch's original blueprints, which was successfully flown at RAF Oddham on February 2, 2000 for a Channel 4 documentary. On March 17, 2012, another full-size replica, this time radio-controlled, was successfully flown off the chapel roof at Colditz Castle and made a perfect landing in the meadow across the river, fully validating the remarkable skill and ingenuity of the camp's prisoners. By the time Colditz was liberated by American troops on April 15, 1945, an estimated 36 prisoners had made home runs, making it all the way back to Allied lines. Incredibly, in the 6 years the camp was in operation, only one prisoner was killed while escaping, British Lieutenant Michael Sinclair, who in September 1944 was shot by a sentry while trying to climb over a barbed wire fence. But the hundreds of other failed escapes were not in vain. Allied aircrew swore an oath that, if captured, they would make every possible attempt to escape. The intent was not only to make it back home, but to harass the enemy and tie up troops and resources that would have been otherwise used on the front. Escape attempts also helped boost morale by keeping the prisoners occupied and staving off idleness and boredom, and in both these respects, the escapees of Colditz Castle and other POW camps did as much as any man to bring about Allied victory in the Second World War. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. Please do check out our fantastic sponsor, War Thunder. There is a link below. And as always, thank you for watching.